Welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in to Wicked Repairs. My name is Chris, and here is an actual full-time video of removing the carburetor on my Aaron's snowblower, going through it, cleaning it, and getting this thing running. It's an Aaron's model. It has a Tecumseh motor on it, and again, it's pretty basic to what most snowblowers are like. Right here, I'm just working on getting the cover off by taking out the key and using a flathead to pop off the choke knob, and then we're going to take off all the hardware that holds this cover on. There is 4 bolts that are on this, 2 in the front, 1 in the back, and 1 in the top. Yours may differ by size or type. Sometimes, someone changes them along the way, whatever the case may be. Mine was all Torx on this, T25s. But I've had some that are all 1/4-inch bolts as well. So again, they may be different from what mine was. The cover comes off, and there's an electrical wire that you're going to want to either disconnect, or you can leave it connected like I did here and just put the cover to the side. Now here I'm just loosening up the bolts that mount the carburetor to the motor, and then I'm going to take the socket for the bolt underneath that holds the float bowl onto the carburetor, and I'm going to loosen that up now. All I did was loosen up the bolts. You do have to loosen them up quite a bit, but you don't have to remove them unless you're going to take the carburetor completely off. I just loosened them up enough to slide the carburetor back off a little bit to be able to get the float bowl off, because if you don't, you can't remove the float bowl without loosening the 2 Torx screws that hold the carburetor to the motor. Now I do have a couple rags on the snowblower itself to catch any fuel and debris that comes out, and you can't really see on the screen, but underneath the snowblower on the inside of the tire, I do have a little container to catch any fuel that comes out. That way it's not really spilling all over the place, because you will see at one point in this video I leave the fuel on and there is fuel that comes pouring out of the carburetor. So right here, when I popped off the float bowl, boy, this thing is disgusting inside. There's so much stuff in it, and I'm going to show you it here in a second. Usually you want to replace the float bowl gasket if you can, or reuse it if it's good. In this case, I was lucky enough that I was able to reuse the float bowl gasket, and it seals no problem, once it's all done and I put it back together. But let's get a closer look at how nasty this actually is inside. Look at the nastiness inside that carburetor. Gross. Look at, ugh. Yeah, there's fuel dunking everywhere. Needle valve isn't sealing properly until you close it like this. So right here I'm trying to get the pin off of the float bowl so that I can remove it, inspect the needle valve, check the tip of it. Usually, a lot of times you could pop it off with your hand. I was having a little trouble. I couldn't quite get it. So I'm going to get up here and grab a pair of pliers out of my toolbox and just very easily and carefully take the pliers, pull the pin off. I've seen sometimes where the pins have been seized in there on real bad situations. This one wasn't. I just couldn't get it off by hand. So grabbing a pair of small pliers, pulling the pin out, nice and easy and quick. And that way we can inspect the needle valve as well as access the seat from the needle valve and be able to clean that with carburetor cleaner and some compressed air. Make sure we get all of that stale gelatinous fuel out of there. Gross. Gasket might actually be okay. Look at this. nastiness. Alright, I gotta get a brush to clean that with. I have a little wire brush that fits pretty good inside the float bowls. This thing was full of like rust and junk, so I'm gonna take it and clean it out real good. This little wire brush. Basically, I'm just scrubbing it, getting all the surface rust that's been sitting in there. Basically, what happens with these carburetors and the ethanol fuel, you have aluminum needle, you have a brass seat usually a lot of times. Sometimes it's stainless too, which is good. And you have the aluminum float bowl. You have different types of metals in there. Basically, what happens is electrolysis inside your carburetor because of the ethanol fuel, and it just wreaks havoc. Clearly, this thing is disgusting. It's been sitting since last year. I haven't had to use it, and the fuel that was sitting in there got really, really gross. I would actually highly recommend that even if your machine happens to run, say you pull it out and it starts and runs, that you check the carburetor, or just check your carburetor before even running the machine, because if it does run and the carburetor looks like mine does, they're going to pick up that stuff inside of your jets, and it's going to stop running in the middle of a snowstorm, and you definitely don't want that to happen. So I'm going to keep cleaning it, spraying out the bowl. I'm going to spray the carburetor itself now, spraying through the ports and the jets through the needle seat, and just clean everything out as best as possible with a can of carburetor cleaner and some compressed air. When you're done cleaning through the carburetor and you reinstall the float bowl and the needle, you do want to check that it's flowing properly, that it's sealing properly. Make sure nothing got out of adjustment or anything like that. So I would highly recommend you reinstall it before putting the float bowl back on, and turn the fuel valve to on and check it by just lifting the float bowl up and making sure it seals. And you'll see me do that here in a couple minutes, just to make sure that it seals properly, that the needle valve is moving freely. Sometimes the seats have a lot of junk on them and you need to clean those up. Luckily this one wasn't too bad, and it sealed good in the way we want it to. Turn the fuel on, and I'm just testing that it seats properly. I open it up, the fuel flows. When I close it up, it stops, and I'm only holding lightly. I'm not holding a lot of pressure. Okay. We shut the fuel back off. let it flow out what's in there. Alright. Well, this gasket may or may not work. I think it'll be alright though. And of course, at this point, what you want to do is just reinstall everything the way you took it off. It's as simple as that. Going through it, cleaning it, reinstalling it. Everything you took off, everything you did, you just go in reverse to reverse that process. The only thing you have to pay attention, a lot of times these float bowls, they have like a little step into them, and that step usually goes where the pin side of the float bowl is, where it mounts inside your carburetor. That's going to help with the way that your fuel sits in your carburetor and the way that the float moves, and to get the proper float height. So if that float bowl is in the wrong position, you could have a different fuel height. Maybe when you tip up the machine to turn it or something, if it's burning through fuel, it might run a little rough. we're getting ready to start it up. And one thing I always do, no matter what you do, when you do something to a machine, check everything. Make sure all your cables are good, moving freely. I'll pull the pull start here just to make sure it feels good. And then I'm going to use the electric start to actually start it. And I'm going to check all the functions of the chute, the auger, the drive, make sure everything's working properly. The last thing you want to do is clean the carburetor and get everything running, but realize that your auger doesn't work because you didn't check it. I'm sure you can hear the idle. It's kind of loping a little bit, up and down, up and down, up and down. It's not really staying super steady. Sometimes some machines do that. You can make some fine adjustments usually to fix that. Mine did clear up after about a minute or two of running it. It might have had a little bit of water inside the fuel. I did put a little bit of extra fuel in it right as I started with some fuel stabilizer, which is very important. And but once it burned through a little bit, it was absolutely fine, ran great. And during the snowstorm the next day that I had to use the thing, it did a fantastic job, and it's much easier and better than shoveling. Well, hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hopefully you learned at least something from it. If not, feel free to ask any questions, leave some comments below. I know the video wasn't like up front and inside there and crazy, but just to get the idea of it, and with the commentary that I kind of put in there, hopefully it helped you along the way to getting yours repaired, cleaning your carburetor. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, just leave a comment below, and I'll be more than happy to answer them and help you any way I can. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumb up. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, and it helps me out. So thank you so much. Let's see you on the next one.